Good morning. We are excited to have you joining us for the Rural Life Virtual Summer Institute. This is day 2 of 5. I see some familiar names from yesterday and hope many of you will join us for other sessions throughout the rest of this week. We're excited to have you this morning, though, for the session Unlocking the Learning Potential for All Students, High Leverage Strategies to Support Literacy. So my name is Bethany Fillers. I'm Director of Professional Learning for Rural Life, and I'm also the session host this morning. So I'm here to support the session presenters, who I'll introduce shortly, offer technical assistance to you as participants, as well as share session evaluation and certificate information at the end of the session. And with me is John Payne, so you'll also see several chats coming from him, including the VSI website and other information about accessing materials. But please do not hesitate to use the chat feature to ask us questions or to request technical support. And man, at this time, I'm so excited to introduce to you all Leading Edge Learning. And at that, I'll let them share their names with you. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you this morning. And thank you, Bethany and John. And I see several of the other nice Wonger folks on this morning. It is good to be together today. So yes, I'm Teresa Gibson, and I am here from Leading Edge Learning. We've had the privilege of working with the Niswonger Foundation for many, many years. And I have my colleague Nancy with me. Nancy, if you just want to jump on and say hi.
Good morning.
So we have been working most recently, and we continue to work on the Rural Life Grant with the Niswonger Foundation. And this morning, we want to come together with you for the brief hour and 15 minutes that we have to think about the learning sciences and how we can make some high leverage practices support literacy instruction. And so we're going to do a little bit of each, and then we're going to dive into some models of what that might look like. But to get us going this morning, a couple of things. We are very interactive presenters. We want to hear your voice. We want you to jump into the chat. So you're going to see us inviting you to engage this morning. That's a great way from learning sciences to process your learning. So you will get the most out of the session if you do jump in and engage. Just a couple of nitty-gritty logistics. If your name is not correct, it depends on how you join the session. You may see someone else's name displayed. And if you want to correct that, you can just mouse over the 3 little dots, the top right next to your face, and it will give you the option to rename yourself. So if you're noticing that's not really my name, you are welcome to do that. When you joined us today, you also were unmuted. That is because we want you to be able to jump on the mic, and we will invite you to. But if you want to double check right now as we get rolling, just to make sure you're muted while you're not speaking, we do welcome you to unmute yourself and jump onto the mic as we call out and invite you to join us in engaging today. So I am Teresa Gibson, and I'm really excited to kind of kick off and activate our thinking just a little bit about if we're going to unlock the learning potential in all of the students we work with, we also have to be able to do as much for ourselves. And so what we're going to do is start today by examining some of our own personal bias. And so I hope that this actually gets you a little fired up and provoked. Some of these myths you're going to be like, I do not believe that. And I want you to say what and why in the chat. And some of you are going to defend some of these myths. And so what we want to do, we're going to start with this Mythbusters format. This is for you. There's lots of us. We're going to try to do this via chat feature. I want you to defend and debate and argue these myths, because behind every myth, there's a grain of truth. That's where they come from, right? All the stories are true. And so we know that when we face things that people are like, this is a myth, there is some truth in a lot of what is in a myth. And so we want to activate our thinking, examine our own bias as we jump into thinking about high quality literacy instruction by just putting in front of you a couple of myths that we pulled from an article. And I'm happy to share the article in the chat too. So what we're going to do, I'm going to put up the myth. I'm going to give you a second to look at it. And then I'm going to invite you to jump into the chat to kind of react. So here's the first myth. It says myth number 2 because I'm using the numbering from the article. Silent, independent reading is not learning. That is myth number 2. And so I have a prompt that I'm inviting you to respond to. You are also welcome to respond in another way. But what I want us to start out with is when we look at this and we see this is listed as a myth, when is silent independent reading learning and how do we know? If it's a myth, then it must be that there's some way that we are learning from it in some instances. So jump into the chat. This is your opportunity to react. When do you think learning does occur with silent independent reading? And how do you know?
I actually kind of agree with that, just because, I mean, I actually, that's how actually I learned the best, is by silent reading. For some reason, it just literally goes in one ear out the other when someone tells me, like, try to teaches me that way.
Excellent, Lydia. So that helps you to process when you have that silent independent reading time. Great. Anyone else? How do you react to this myth? Amy says her child reads a lot and learns a lot from it, gains vocabulary and experiences. Yes, when we see new vocabulary, I love it, right? Think about the exposure to text that kids are getting. And a lot of people are like, that's how I learn. I prefer that quiet environment for learning in a lot of cases. When students are proficient readers, oh, I love that, Stephanie. We're already getting into thinking about, are they reading something they can comprehend and they're fluent in? So what are they reading and how are they engaging with that reading? Yes, it can build that fluency, can build stamina. Yes, and then Mona's saying, you know, I'm thinking like, yes, they might be learning. They might also need some scaffolded supports in some cases, right? So maybe it's not these long spans of silent independent reading. Maybe it's smaller chunks of silent independent reading. Yeah, Carla's saying it's important to be making connections with what we're reading. Yeah, silent reading can really help with that processing time, building their comprehension, letting them kind of have that metacognitive activity, engaging with the text. Good. All right, I love it. This is like a great game, a great way to get us thinking about literacy instruction. We're going to try another myth. Let's face another so-called myth for reading instruction. Teachers reading books aloud that students can't read is not, or is a good accommodation. Oh, I was supposed to say is not a good accommodation. I'm sorry. I'm going to fix that right now. Thank goodness for Google Slides. That's the myth. I couldn't even type it. Apparently it like hurt me. So thinking about this myth, go ahead and give us your reactions. When is the read aloud appropriate or good for learning?
I think it is, just because I don't know. I don't think I was taught hooked on phonics when I was learning how to read, so I really don't know how some of these words are pronounced. Like I thought kernel was colonial because it's just the way it was. So
because if you sound it out by syllables, that's what you're gonna get.
That's what it looks like. So that's kind of, I think it's a good accommodation anyway.
Thank you, Lydia. Yes, and I see in the chat, lots of people agreeing this is a model of fluency. It can help people understand these pronunciations and how we are using the different grammatical pieces that are in the text. So when fluent readers read, they pause in appropriate places, they take breaths, they use silence actively for their voice. Good job. It can expose kids to vocabulary above their means. Good, I love it. And some people do like that auditory processing. Very good. Right. And in different contexts, we all like auditory processing, depending on what we're doing and what we're trying to engage with. And that it allows teachers to model that think aloud. I love it.
I think also it's good for like English language learners, because there's a lot of, I don't know what that word's called, but like two words are spelled the same, but they sound different.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's also good for that too.
Yes, they're homonyms, right? I mean, yes. I was like, it's like a pop quiz. Is it a homophone or a hominid? It's a hominid. Okay, great.
Hey, Teresa.
Yes.
I'll have to dig for the exact study, but there is a very well-known study that says that actually our oral comprehension outpaces our reading comprehension until we're at age 14 or 15. So all the way through middle school and on into that freshman year of high school, kids greatly benefit from hearing a fluent reader read aloud. And it's a wonderful way to increase their own comprehension of text outside of what they might be able to do reading it themselves at that point. So, which is why Tennessee places such a premium on read aloud in its literacy blocks.
Excellent. Yes, Bethany, and I'm glad you brought up those ages, that middle and high school age where we tend to read aloud less and less to the kids in front of us. And it's so important. And Catherine brought up a great point too in the chat about it can be a great experience, right? Students can see us our love for reading when we're reading aloud, especially if we're reading something that we really enjoy. They can see our passion, and it builds that nice culture where we can get excited about reading and become lifelong readers because of it. Great. All right, one more. This one's a little more controversial, maybe not. We'll see. So thinking about the fifth myth in the article is teachers need to assess independent reading by having students summarize in a journal their nightly reading or do a project for every book they complete. And this one I'm asking, when might the assessment be helpful? When might it be a hindrance? Because I kind of think, can we think about both sides of this coin? I'm very pro, especially formative assessment. When is it helpful to assess some independent reading? When is it a hindrance? And maybe some why. Yes, Amy. Are those your only two choices? Absolutely not, Richard. Jump in with other options. Absolutely. I know this one I was like, what should I ask? But definitely reading can be just for fun. We can. All right. Students do need to be writing daily, but it doesn't always have to be a nightly or weekly project. I agree. Right. And I like to ask when I think about this, because I'm an avid reader. And so I will read, well, when I allow myself to read fiction, I can read many, many books in 1 month. And if I had to actually respond with a project to each book, I would probably actually just lie about how many I read. But it can feel punitive, right? Like, okay, well, because I read more, I now have to do more work to do it. I love it. Yes. And Adrian's saying you can see why there's a need to assess some of it, right? A lot of times we need to know a little bit about their reading. And so sometimes the assessment's really appropriate and necessary. And sometimes we're actually trying to discern how much of the time we're giving them to read are they actually reading. Especially when we have concerns that someone is not reading, they're faking it, right? Because they might need, as we were talking about in a prior myth, they might need some more scaffolded supports to be successful in the text. They might need exposure to some lower level text before and integrated in with some higher level text or at grade level text in order to be successful.
One of the things that, Lucy Calkins, who's a great mentor of my, of mine for many years, she talks about this and talks about what do we as adult readers like to do? And I'm sorry, Teresa, I just couldn't let this one go because but as adult readers, a lot of times we talk about books. And so maybe one way to address this is to have students talk about the books that they're reading and share them with one another. And that kind of takes that accountability, kind of holds them accountable, even if they're not reading the same book, but I can still talk to you about a book. So.
Right. Absolutely. No, Nance, I was laughing because Alex was saying very similar stuff in the chat, like simultaneously, right? Like we do need to make time and space for those discussions because talking about text can get us really engaged and excited. And it's a great way to process and build comprehension. I love it. And other things like their own opinions and finding text evidence. Fantastic. All right. So then what does the research say for high quality teaching and learning for literacy? Now that we've thought about some of those myths and some of the values, and what we're going to do, we're going to start off with just a really high level view of this, taken from a research synthesis from Ellington and Gabriel. And it is just 6 things that they say every child should engage with every day in order to build their literacy skills. And I love to put it out there kind of as these high level words. They should have some choice, right? They should be reading with accuracy. They should be able to comprehend. When they're writing, it should have some personal meaning to them. It should be meaningful to them. They should be able to have peer-to-peer conversation, and they should be hearing read alouds. And so just to dig in a little bit further with each of these, when we talk about these 6 elements, at some point in every day. So not every time they read, but at some point in every day, a child should have some choice about what they're reading. And so when we talk about choice, we like to think about it as bounded choice. You can help support a reader in finding appropriate text, but sometimes we all pick up that trashy novel and read it, right? And it could be well below our comprehension level, and that's okay, because that might be what we enjoy. And sometimes you have kids who pick up a text you know is way beyond them, but if they're willing to struggle through it for a little while, that can be a productive struggle, so long as it's not the only thing they're attempting to read. And then, of course, we know we have to put some grade level content in front of them. Every child reads accurately. And so this is where we're thinking about, they cannot always be reading text at grade level if they're 3 levels below, because they're not improving their accuracy and they're not having that experience where they can start to be in their zone of proximal development and build up to that grade level reading. So thinking about how can we offer a mix of reading levels to help build their vocabulary and their fluency, but still be engaging them with at grade level material too. Every child reads something he or she understands. This is all in the same vein, right? We have to be willing to provide text that they do understand and text that helps to build that next level of understanding. Every child writes about something personally meaningful. And so we know we also give standard prompts, but how often can we help them connect text to something personally meaningful for them? And that can be through processing. It can be starting from scratch that's not associated with the text, but they need to be given the opportunity. Every child talks with peers about reading and writing, and several people already brought this up in the chat. They need to be able to discuss the literature that they're engaging with and the things that they're writing. And then finally, every child listens to a fluent adult read aloud. And we hit this spot on in the Mythbusters with they need to be able to hear fluent readers. It doesn't always have to be the teacher who's the fluent reader, but they need that model and they need that auditory processing of what does it sound like to read fluently, to use grammar appropriately, and to build and they can also build their vocabulary through hearing those read alouds. All right. And this, when we say every child every day, we know this goes well beyond the ELA classroom, right? We know there's an ELA block. So we have to think about whole school experience in every child's every day. Do they have the opportunity to engage with these 6 elements of effective literacy instruction? So we can build our readers. All right. Thank you so much for your excellent engagement and participation. We want you to continue to engage throughout the session. What we're going to do now is, now that we're really thinking and fired up about literacy and what is purposeful and meaningful behind it, we're going to start to look at the learning science literature to say, well, what do we know about the brain and how people learn? And Nancy's going to guide us through some immersive activities to get us thinking about how the brain works. Just give us a moment. We're just switching.
All right, there we go. So sorry about that. I had lost my Zoom controls there for a minute when I was switching. So, okay, so let's take a look at the at learning sciences. In order to unlock the potential for every student, we do need to think about how do we learn. And so we go back to the learning sciences to help us think about that. And as we're going through this, I want you to keep in mind those 6 key elements and the things that you know about building a culture of literacy and good literacy practices as we look at these learning sciences. So think about how might you incorporate these into your literacy instruction. So we're going to pull out 3 key pieces of the learning sciences today as we look at these. They are the power of visuals, move it, and chunk it. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about these as we go through. So the first one is the power of visuals. So I'm going to give you a quick quiz. I want you to just, on a little piece of paper, something close by, number 1 to 4, or you can use just number 1 to 4. All right. And name these things that you see. What restaurant is this associated with? All right. What about this one? All right. What brand is this? Oops. Who is this person? All right. So let's see how well you did. This is, of course, McDonald's, right? The Golden Arches. What about this one? This is Teresa's favorite here. Starbucks. Well, maybe I should just say coffee is her favorite, but we'll go with Starbucks. What about this one, right? It's Coke. That little wave it's kind of amazing that little wave, we know it's a Coke. And this guy, that cape gives it away, right? Superman. So why do you think that you can remember all of those symbols?
Because it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere, right? What else? It's April, the repetitive, it's a visualization. Yep. So we visualize these things, and it's everywhere. We see it. And, we talk about, if I go back to my very early emergent literacy, that is the beginning of literacy, right? Is to read images. But and pictures Tim, you and I are on the same wavelength this morning. Pictures are a form of language. And so it is, all of these things are important to us because we see them everywhere. They're visuals and they're all around us. The saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, is pretty impactful, right? These are some places I've been and some things that I've done. And then this middle one is, I think none of us can forget that image, right? And we know exactly where that was. And with former President Bush there. And, but that image, or any of these images or pictures on our phone, right? They really speak to us. But this isn't just something that, it's a marketing ploy with all of the, with the images, and they're all around us, or something that tugs at our heartstrings when we see pictures. There is science behind this. And an important piece that we need to think about as we unlock that potential for all of our students is this idea of visuals, using visuals. So what's the science? Well, the human brain can process visual information 60,000 times faster than text. So when we see an image, we can process it so much more quickly than we can text. Okay, so why is this? Well, this is because Alan Pavlov, it's dual coding theory is the theory behind it. And it's because a picture, I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to go back to, I skipped, I think I'm jumping slides here, but sorry. Here, let's do this one first before Pavlov's. But so we know that we can process those visuals 60,000 times faster, right? But when we pair text and visual, we get even more comprehension, greater comprehension. And so if we're seeing the visual, plus we're also having those words, just like Starbucks. I had taken out the word, the lettering on Starbucks or McDonald's, it's usually written right across the golden arches. So we both see the visual as well as the words there. And that's because text and visuals together, it stimulates both hemispheres of our brain, and it improves the comprehension, it enhances our retrieval, and it also increases our retention, our ability to remember something, okay? And so the theory behind this, now we'll get to caveats, dual coding theory, is because it's hitting both sides of our brain, right? So the picture is nonverbal processing. So we see those things. And if we can hear it as well, we get the verbal processing, and then we can connect those things into knowledge. Okay. And so that long-term memory is where we want things to go. So, right? Yes, Scott, visuals and text is huge for classroom learning. And so, sometimes we just think of it as an ELL strategy or for our English language learners, but it's really a great strategy for all students to help unlock that potential. Is that the picture and the words together, it's going to help us comprehend and help us learn more. This is a Frey and Fisher, the Nancy Frey and Doug Fisher, two of my favorites when we think about learning sciences. And this is some research that comes from their book, The Left versus the Right Brain. But research has found that students' ability to comprehend things, especially things like math. I know we're talking about literacy, but I also put this one in here for Teresa because she's a former math teacher. But when they have both halves of the brain working together, so that when they can both see it as well as hear it and understand it, it will help them comprehend more quickly. And so an important thing to think about, gosh, I'm really jumping today. An important thing to think about is that when we think about this dual coding, which again, that's the name for this, is dual coding. It's not learning sciences. So we're not saying I'm a visual thinker, or I'm a visual learner, or I'm an auditory learner. We might have things that we know help us learn more quickly, or like we were talking about earlier, when we hear things out loud, maybe we're better at them. But dual coding is actual science. And so thinking about how can we unlock that potential and help all of our students use things like dual coding to help them better comprehend. So just a quick question here, just thing to think about: how might you leverage pairing visuals with text to improve literacy instruction? So what are some ways that you might, in your literacy instruction, and we didn't even ask, but I'm assuming all of you either teach literacy or you support teachers who are ELA teachers, or maybe you're a math or science or social studies teacher. But how could you use this idea about pairing visuals to improve instruction?
You could use models for either math or science instead of just giving them the definition.
Yeah, using those models and pairing the pictures. Great. So I think that's one of those ones that we need to kind of keep in the back of our mind as we're preparing our lessons. And how might we scaffold, especially new ideas and new concepts? How can we pair them with pictures? Yeah. And Scott, the railroad rod through his brain, right? Then if we're talking about that, or we are reading something, it is great to have those visuals. Let's go on to our next one, which is move it. Our next learning focus from brain science. And so we're going to start this one with actually getting you all to move. I want you to jump up and I want you to go grab a recent book that you've enjoyed reading, or stand up right now and maybe find a quick article that you have recently read that was meaningful for you. All right. So I'm going to put on some music, give you about 30 seconds to go grab something that you've recently read. And hopefully you've enjoyed it, but even if you haven't enjoyed it, maybe something you've recently read. So let's stand up, and I'm putting on some music, 30 seconds. All right, ready, go. All right. Hopefully that was enough time. At least maybe you stood up, even if you didn't run go grab something. I grabbed this book, Where the Crawdads Sing. I just read this. It was a great quick read. My mom gave me the large print version, which was actually kind of like luxurious to have the large print. I was like, oh man, I'm showing my age here. Yes, it was a great book. I highly recommend it. So I'd love for you to just, if you're able to turn on your camera, and you want to just kind of show, and you might want to put your into gallery mode or kind of look and see what other people are holding up. Oh, look. Oh, pattern fitting them. Oh, Bethany reading The Hobbit.
It's a family read. We're doing it together.
Oh, fun. A great read aloud. Yep. All right. And if you're not able, if you want to share in the chat, what did you read and why did you like it? Yeah. Oh, The Nightingale.
Because I need to sew pants that actually fit me.
Oh, great, Lydia. I'm so impressed. Right. Yes. Oh, nice. Summertime dreams. Oh goodness, all these books. I would love to, like, if we had more time, we could sit here and have
my book buying habit.
What did you say, Teresa?
So this is dangerous for my book buying habit. Like,
I know Teresa does have a book buying habit. I love it.
We're
She
gonna have
reads
our
all the books and
Amazon
then she
carts
tells
ready to
me
go.
when they're workbooks or books related to work, she's like, she passes them to me and she's like, I've already highlighted the things you need to know, or like, here, read these 3 chapters. Like, I love it. And we could have a whole book conversation right now. I know some of you are probably jumping in, like wanting to do that. If we had more time, we'd throw you into breakout rooms and let you share. But we just got up. Hopefully, you got a little bit of movement going, the blood flowing. But let's talk about that. Oh, Black Hawk Down. Oh, Robert, I bet that's good. I've seen the movie, but I bet the book is even better. Oh goodness. All right. Oh, the things we cannot say. Oh gosh, y'all are like, I'm like, okay, writing all these down. So why is movement important? Well, we know that this one is from pediatrics, and it talks about that we know that most children between the ages of 4 and 13, that when they have physical activity, it improves their behavior in classrooms, and it also boosts their academic achievement. So if we're really trying to work towards unlocking the potential of all of our students, how can we get that movement into our classroom, and meaningful movement, purposeful movement, not just get up and run around, but like, how might we incorporate some movement? Even maybe something like this, maybe where you pull out a book that you've been reading, and maybe we find a partner and can talk about that reading. And then, there's lots of ideas there, but how can we incorporate purposeful movement into our classrooms? One more, just really quickly here, and maybe a lot of us have been sitting a lot, but a recent study in 2018 found that sitting more than 6 hours a day was a higher increase of mortality from cancer, heart disease, and other things, right? Wow. I mean, 6 hours a day. I know I'm often doing that. So we want to get people up. We want to move, not only because it's going to be better for our health, but also because it increases our academic achievement. So I'm going to put this, or maybe Teresa can drop this in the chat for us. And I want you just to take a minute, and this is just a short, 10 reasons for students to move. Just take a quick look. I gave you 2 reasons. So just quickly take a look at this link, and what stands out to you? If you want to respond in the chat as you're reading this, or if you want to raise your Zoom hand, you can kind of see there, and I'll call on people. Maybe we can have a quick little discussion about this. So 10 reasons for students to move it. And these are in no particular order. They're just 10 reasons. So take a look here for a minute.
I know I personally zone out if I sit for more than like 10 minutes at a time and I just don't listen to what is said afterwards.
Yeah. Yes, breaking things up like that is important through the reading. Yes, Jeffrey, number 5 is really interesting. And I know for me, if I'm meeting or doing a lot of thinking and processing, it really helps me to walk around. So a lot of times I'll get up and walk around, or I have great thoughts after I've been on a walk. Like I have new ideas after I've been on a walk. Yes.
I guess that's why my husband always walks around when he's on the phone.
Yep, there you go. Right, he's walking and thinking.
Sometimes
Did
Nancy
you know
and I
this one
schedule.
actually? Oh, what, Teresa?
Sometimes Nancy and I schedule meetings on the phone so we can pace while we talk to each other.
Yes, we do. Also, and if you have young children, that crawling is really important. And if you have a child that didn't crawl, or didn't crawl for very long, kind of skip that process and kind of, some children go right to standing and then walking. There's actually things that are linked, and they have difficulty sometimes tracking reading. So with young students, and that's because it's related to that bilateral movement across the brain. And so a lot of times occupational therapists will work with them on bilateral, or even maybe your PE teacher, bilateral movement. So. All right. What else? Oh yeah, Amanda, 1 and 6. Yes, when we're talking about active engagement and better attention, this is kind of to Lydia's point there. Yes, Brittany, check that out. Like we have to look that up about reading and crawling, making sure your children crawl, right? Or getting that, or just the bilateral movements, things like passing a ball from one hand to the other. Oh, Miriam, that's great. Yeah. So when you have learning stations in the classroom that students are more actively participating, that's great. And these, all of the research is linked down below. So if you want to go and do a little bit more reading on these, but yes, I'm looking number 10. Yeah, that's interesting, Scott, as you think about that for boys. Yeah. Yeah. Teresa's saying it was important for her son. So all of these things hopefully will help you as you think about the students in your classroom, and as you think about unlocking that learning potential. How can you incorporate purposeful and meaningful movement, like Miriam was talking about stations? I think that another great idea for movement is sometimes if you're reading a book or an article, to pull out quotes. You could put those quotes up around the room and then have students maybe move to one. And yeah, Teresa's saying rotate. They could go to the one that stood out to them or have conversations at each of the quotes, and then maybe come back together. So that's kind of that purposeful, meaningful movement that hopefully we can incorporate into our classrooms to help unlock that potential. All right. So any other ideas? I just gave you an idea. You all have come up with some more in the chat, but any other ways that you can think? How have you integrated movement to help improve your literacy instruction or your instruction? How have you been able to do that?
I think learning stations might be peer-to-peer conversation.
Yes. And we know that that's engaging that conversation. So we go back, and how that conversation is really important too. And so you can have those learning stations, setting something like that up instead of maybe just having them turn and talk to the person behind them or beside them. Maybe is there a way to get them up and or even stand up and talk to the person behind you? That's also one. I know sometimes our classrooms are really crowded. We don't have a lot of room to move, but instead of just saying, turn and talk to the person beside you or the person behind you, have them stand up and do it.
Nancy, I've seen some wonderful examples of K-5 teachers doing foundational skills work. So that would be tied to this accuracy, reading with accuracy, where our bodies are used in such a way that help us either segment words or think about, the different morphological aspects of the word. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yes,
that excites me.
there you go. Yeah, you say you tap out the syllables, right? We used to
Yeah.
do that. Can you all tell I'm a former kindergarten and first grade? I taught. So yeah, so we stretch out the words, we bubble gum it, we do our bubble gum. Yep. So, but that isn't just for young students, right? If we're thinking about middle grade students, it's still really important to have that or to tap things out. You can have them tap out the syllables, especially as those words get longer or moving things together. All right. And let me look, let me see if there's anything else in the chat. Yes, the rotation of certain degrees, students turn their bodies. Yes, Richard, so if you think about math or I mean, I guess really anything, but that what is 90 degrees? What is 180 degrees? Another great one in, and again, not just for literacy instruction, but math instruction is to do a number line on, especially when we're thinking about positive and negative numbers, and do a physical number line on the ground and then have them move, especially when we're thinking about subtracting. Yes, so it can help move them and they can see the movement on a number line, like adding and subtracting. Those can really help them. Oh yeah, the music teacher, the arm movements, have them stand up and sing. Yeah, just that, the physical movement can really help.
And thinking back to dual coding and like in the music example, in the math example, connecting that back to symbols can be a really important support for their literacy so that they can start to think about those tight connections between the concept and the symbols.
Oh, that's great. Yes, thank you, Teresa. And yet, Miriam, I love that. Many debates and students move to the side of the room and defend their points of view. That's a great one.
Left, right, left. I love it.
Holly, I'm reading through all these things. Yes, Holly, touching and spelling and tracing the words. Oh, I like that one, Richard. So if we can't get up out of our seats, yes to the window, no to the door. Yeah, just getting them interacting and moving with their hands and their bodies, even if we can't have them stand up. Great ideas. These are all great. All right. So let's move to the last one, which is chunk it. And you all have already started to, I think, kind of talk a little bit about this, but let's talk about chunking materials. So, and sorry, my dog has her bone. Can anyone else hear that? Teresa says, yeah, sorry, y'all. Of course.
That's Princess Palmer. She's sorry.
Yes. My dog, as soon as she brings her bone and sits right under, right beside me here. But let's play a little love it or leave it with our working memory. Okay. So just really quickly, I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Do not write anything down. So put your pencils down. I should tell you, hands on your head, right? And memorize the following. Is it gonna? Oops. Oh, goodness. All right, there we go. Memorize, 5 seconds. All right, now I want you to write down what you remembered. All right, let's try it again. All right, now write down what you remembered. All right, how many of you all remembered more the second time?
Does it have to be in order?
No, it doesn't have to be in order, but how many of you all got it right? Yes. Remembered a lot more the second time. Yes. Good, all of them. So this is, what was the difference in the first and the second one? The first one was,
The words were all smushed together.
it was all same letters, but it was all just mumbo jumbo, right? When I put them into, when I chunked them and also put them into, put them into something that was meaningful, our brain could connect to. Yes. And it goes back to association, right? And we chunked it. You were able to associate these a lot easier to remember. So there's a lot there that we can unpack with learning sciences. We could talk about association. So when students can associate or have knowledge or meaning to something, add knowledge and personal meaning to something, it helps them to remember it. But we're going to go also with really focusing on the chunking. Okay. And so we know that our brains have limited capacity, and limited capacity really being more for our short-term memory. Okay, when we're talking about this, I'm using that word brain kind of big picture, but really more specifically, it's about our short-term memory. And when we think about this, elementary students can only hold about 1 to 2 bits of information in their working memory. Middle school, hopefully we can increase that a little bit, maybe up to even 4. Okay. High school students, maybe up to 5 bits of information. And so if you're presenting something, and we're going to talk about middle grades here, but I'm just going to use middle grades, for example, but if you ask them to remember, 5 or 6 different things all at once, most students are going to reach their capacity, right? They're not going to really remember anymore, or they might get frustrated and they're going to lose focus, or they might replace things or mix them up. And so we've all probably experienced this before, right? When we're trying to remember things and things get mixed up, right? Or we're trying to remember, there's something to be said for about that 5. If you have more than 5 things you need at the grocery store, you need to write it down, right? Yep, and there you go, Teresa. That's so funny. You just said that. But yeah, the grocery store. And it's because our brain, our short-term memory only has but so much space in there. So when we think about our students, this is why if we give them too many directions, sometimes they mess them up, or they zone out, or they lose focus. And so how can we chunk things to make it more manageable for our students? So when we chunk it, or give them smaller bits of information at one time, it makes it, they're more likely to remember those things. Right? So we have a limited amount of space. We also have it's also about time. So younger students can only spend about 5 to 10 minutes of focused attention before we need to switch. Okay. Before we have to switch, we only about 5 to 10 minutes. Older students, older than 14, about 10 to 15. So Lydia, when you were talking about like more than 10 minutes, and then you kind of start to zone out, right? This is the same for our students, for older students. And so when we think about this time thing, you might be thinking, but Nancy, my class blocks are 60 minutes, or I have 90 minutes. What do I do? You're telling me only 10 minutes. Well, when we think about this capacity of time, just like with the capacity of size, right? The number of the 3 to 5 bits of information. So we have to give them short directions and then give them the next set of directions. We also have to think about time and chunking our lessons into time. So when we think about this, it's important to think about passive versus active instruction. So passive instruction is when might be things like listening to a lecture. Right now, you're listening to me, right? Or when you're reading academic text. So this is not text that we're reading for fun or for pleasure, but this is more intense text that we're really having to think and decode and really use a lot of our cognitive and stamina in order to read, or when we're listening to somebody or we're watching a video, right? This is passive. Okay. When we switch active are things like talking to one another, practicing, or completing, trying to do something. Or for us right now, when we ask you to put something in the chat, that would be more active. Okay. So passive versus active. So now if I go back to those bits of time, it isn't that I can only spend 10 minutes and then we have to have recess, right? Or, run around time, or, get up and get the wiggles out. This is 10 minutes of passive before I switch my modality, switching from passive to active. And there's a lot of other examples of things that could be active, right? It's not just these three, it's anything where students are engaging in something else. So like somebody earlier, I think it was Rodney or Richard talked about the pointing yes and no. That would be active, right? I'm asking you actually, do you, are you with me? Do you understand the directions? Give me a thumbs up. That's a little more active, right? I'm getting you to engage with me. You're not just listening. You have to actually respond to me. Okay. So if after 10 minutes of passive learning, we just need to switch it up. So just like I said, you can ask them, do you understand the directions, or, do you agree with my statement? Yes or no, right? You could point. Here are some other ideas. So they can be listening to you, and then you can have them turn for discussion right after 10 minutes, just making sure that you don't talk longer than 10 minutes. They can be listening to you or listening to a video. Then you could have them write a reflection, right? Write down what you're thinking. Right? So it doesn't mean that we can never show a video. If we have a great video that's 15 minutes, maybe we find that a stopping point at some point where we could pause the video and ask a question, ask them to write or respond, and then watch the rest of the video. They could be listening and then maybe ask them to actually apply what, so we're teaching a math concept. You're showing some things now, try one on your own. Right? They could be listening and then you ask them to read, or it could be a break. So these are all ideas on how you can chunk this so that, number one, they are staying focused, the time, but then also it helps with not overloading their short-term memory, right? Not overloading them with too much information all at once, giving them time to process. So here's an example. This is what I might ask students to do. And this might be, this could be at a station, right? If I'm doing something else, or this could be how I'm working in my classroom. So I'm going to give you just, maybe I have a long article, but I'm going to first ask you just to read sections A and B. And this might be I might give you about 7 to 10 minutes to do this. Then I might ask you to turn and talk to a partner, and then we're going to keep on going. Let's read a little bit more. And then I might ask them to summarize. And, if I'm doing this virtually, I might tell them to take a break. Maybe they send me a brain teaser or hello video, and then ask them to complete an assignment. So you can see we can chunk these things up in different ways in order to help improve their attention and make sure that they're learning, right? Us lecturing for 30 minutes may not, even though it's a great lecture and it's amazing, or we have something planned, right? If they've checked out, they've zoned out, it's not going to help them. So as we think about chunking information, has anybody experienced this or tried this, or are you kind of conscious of this as you're planning lessons? Anybody have any thoughts here?
Nancy, the ones that stand out to me in terms of chunking would be just that opportunity to stop and maybe do a quick write, like some kind of meaningful writing, like back to the text and something that I'm seeing evidence of in the text, and I'm having a chance to process, learn through that writing process, or to turn and talk to a peer. I think those two, in my mind, are great ways to take a break from that kind of passive learning experience to a more active state.
Nancy, I have seen some real effective for middle school and high school students, especially. I think the idea of centers, that it's just a young child elementary thing. I loved going in classroom and seeing older kids being in centers because they were learning, but they were active. And some of the centers may be a little bit more passive than others. But I think that's a good way to engage and keep kids going with centers, even older kids. Learning.
Yes, Catherine, thank you. Yeah, those centers and stations, I love that. A lot of times we do think of that as elementary, but it is a great way to engage all students. And Kristen, yes, I love the chunk and chew, right? That's a great way to think of that. In fact, I might borrow that. Yes, and we chunk it. So we're teaching them something, we've chunked it, and then let them chew on it, let them practice it. And those steps, yes. And Alex, the chunking things by essential questions. Yeah, so you take a break and doing quick writes or discussions. So I think sometimes we have to be conscientious of this, of making sure we're not overloading before we're giving them time to process, time to chew on something, time to think on something, especially when I know you have so much content to cover. But we know that if the brain is going to actually remember things, which is what we want them to learn and remember and be able to move forward in their learning, we have to chunk those things. So hopefully the learning sciences, these are all probably things that you knew, but just being reminded that there is science behind it, that there is, that the power of visuals and movement and chunking information is all really important for our students if we want them to learn and to be able to unlock their potential. So I'm going to turn it back over now to Teresa as we look how to pull, as we think about how we might pull this all back together.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Just stealing the screen back really quick. And what we're going to do now is jump into pulling it all together. So we said at the beginning, we would think about some literacy, get our minds going, and then think about some learning science and what the research on the brain is telling us about how we learn. And then we were going to pull it all together. So now we're going to push ourselves into thinking about, what does this look like in a classroom when you start to really think through the lens of learning science and literacy instruction as you design? And so as we do this, I'm going to actually ask you to be my students, and it's going to be, I put rapid and mini because this is like way faster than it would ever happen in any real classroom. But we wanted to, in our short period of time, give you a little bit of an experience. And so I will shift into teacher mode, and you will all shift your brains into participant mode. So you're my students. And what we're going to do, I'm actually going to do a little close of a lesson in a very rapid pace. So keep in mind, not doing this exactly as I would in a classroom, but it is the feeling, the general feeling. And so what we're working on now is poetry, and we're going to close today with just a quick look at the poem Dreams from Langston Hughes. And I will start by just quickly reading the poem, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of time to react to the poem for yourself. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. So I'm going to invite you now to just reread the poem for yourself. You have a copy at your desk. Pretend you do. This is your desk. Go ahead, reread that poem for yourself. And as you do, just think about how you're reacting to the poem. What does it mean to you? Once you've had a chance to reread the poem for yourself, I'm going to invite you to take out a piece of paper and just jot down some of your personal reflections on the poem. So to help you out, I will flip back to the poem on the screen. So it's posted at the front of the room, but just take a couple of minutes. This is your personal reflection. So it can be about a connection you made. It can be about trying to understand the meaning of the author or the intent of the author in the poem. It can be anything that stands out to you as you react to the poem. So as you have had a couple of minutes, maybe a little bit longer in a real classroom, to write your personal reflection, I'm going to encourage you now to think with a little more focus about the poem itself. And so I'm going to give you a moment to pull your thoughts together. You've done your personal reflection. I've read the poem. You've read the poem. You're welcome to read the poem one more time before I push you into your discussion groups. I want you to think specifically about the use of metaphor in the poem. And when you're in your small discussion group, I want you to think about, what did you think the author was telling us with the writing of this poem? So we've been talking about metaphor for a while. I want you to really think hard about the use of it here. And I want you to think about, what do you think the poem is about? What is it telling you? So surprise, I'm really going to push you into a breakout room with random other people. And I'm just going to give you like 2 minutes, so you won't be able to have the full conversation, but I want you to kind of experience. In my classroom, you would be moving to your small discussion group, which is pre-assigned. So I'm just going to open the rooms, and I'll give you just a couple of minutes to chat. You should be getting a prompt to join a breakout room. All right, if you are stuck in the main room, let me know. If you had to step away for something, that's also fine. Just don't want people to feel stuck.
I got kicked. I need
You
to
got kicked
join
out?
room 6. Yeah,
Room 6?
apologize.
No
Yeah.
worries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Somehow it didn't assign everybody. I think every room has a couple of people in it. No, room 9 doesn't now. All right.
And now Palmer's finished with her bone. Of course. Right?
Officially. Yes, can you look at the breakouts? I don't think everybody's back quite yet. Sorry, it won't pop up for me now that I'm back in sharing.
Yeah, it looks like, yep, looks like everybody. You closed the rooms, right?
I did, yes. Is
Okay.
it done? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so welcome back. Thank you for playing along. Hopefully you had a couple of moments. There were a couple of rooms that only had like one person. I was trying to shift you around. I hope you had a little bit of time to have your discussion. So coming back to the whole classroom, I would invite a debrief so that as the instructor, I would have some time to kind of formatively assess where they're at, what their discussion was, but also they could hear each other's thoughts from the other groups. So the groups would be sharing out at this point. And then to follow that, the thing to send them home with is a challenge to find a text that they've encountered in their life, online, something they've read in the past that uses metaphor in a similar way. So this text for me can be wide open. As my students, you're allowed to select another poem. You can select from a book. You can select from something that you find in an advertisement. I really like when people find some great metaphor in political cartoons. But what I want you to do, we're going to actually start off Monday morning with you sharing with your group the text that you found and how you thought it used metaphor in a similar way. So that is your super rapid, super mini lesson, literacy lesson, fit into about 5 minutes, which might be a world record. So thank you for playing along. As you think about that, really the rapid mini lesson or any other lesson, can you think about, did you see any of the learning sciences strategies or the literacy strategies that we've talked about today wrapped into that mini lesson? And you're welcome to jump on the microphone or drop answers in the chat. What did you see?
Peer-to-peer conversation.
Peer-to-peer conversation, right? And in that case, I was trying to get it as an immediate reaction to the text before I interfered too much. Peer discussion. The quick write, yes. Take a moment to write. That personal reflection, I tried to allow space for it to be a personal connection, should they want to make that connection. Oftentimes, middle schoolers have really strong reactions to poetry, and this one is particularly interesting because it's talking about dreams. Yes, Alex, you caught that. Yeah, if you go back in my slide deck, I actually couched that poem. Sorry, I'm going the wrong direction. In an image of a barren snow-covered field. And I didn't know for sure that people would catch that. But I know earlier someone was saying I like to do poetry without any image and then introduce an image later. And in this particular case, I did the opposite. I kind of snuck an image in there where it wasn't really the point of the slide, but it was in the background to help them visualize, connect that text with the vision. Anything else? What did I do to kick it off? When I started with the poem, that was my read aloud. And hopefully you got a taste of kind of how I engage and read poetry and use the quiet spaces in the poem. Yeah. Let's think. Anything else? What about passive to active? In a real classroom, they would have been longer chunks of time, but I did try to switch between my voice and students being actively engaged and contributing. So getting their voice in there, but also getting them more actively engaged in the processing. So in reality, in a classroom, a lot of what we do can leverage these designs in a fairly simple way without switching too much of our planning. As long as we go in with that design, with these things in mind, we get to see how we can leverage these chunks of time and the picture with text and the dual coding and the movement, which you were virtual, so I moved you via Zoom, but in my classroom, you would have moved around. Another thing Nancy and I love to do for movement is the poster board on the wall. So the kids' discussion, they can take notes or annotate on the wall. And oftentimes we'll end up rotating for a gallery walk. So as we wrap up today, we wanted to ask you to reflect, thinking about high quality literacy instruction informed by learning sciences. What is something that you want to try in your classroom that you feel could help unlock the learning potential for all of your students? And you can drop that in the chat, or if you want it to be a more private reflection, you're welcome to keep it to yourself, or you can jump on the microphone. What is something you want to try? Using more chunking, yes. Yeah, more movement. Particular challenge this year with some kids being remote. Movement can be, I struggle with online movement. Yes, movement with vocabulary and images. Awesome. Thinking about really designing those all in. Stations, which is something as kids age, we see less and less of, but it is still very appropriate based in learning sciences. Connecting visuals to chunking. One powerful thing you can do too is get students to find visuals that resonate with them or that they relate to the text. Can be powerful in having them share. I love it. Okay, and with that, our time is up. We know that John has an evaluation that he would love for you to complete. Thank you, Donna. And he is going to drop that into the chat. We're so glad that you joined us today. This is our contact information. If you can't find something that was from today that was unintentional, we want to share our resources. And so feel free to reach out to either one of us. And with that, we are done. Thank you so much for joining us. Bethany, did you have anything to close?
No, just want to say thank you, and hopefully we'll see some of you in other sessions the remainder of this week. We have 2 more today, and then the rest of the week we have additional sessions. So check out that Virtual Summer Institute website, and just appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you, Nancy and Teresa.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. And don't forget, like John just put it in the chat, but the certificate form will close 15 minutes after the session. So don't forget to fill it out right now. And then that certificate of participation will be emailed to you.